for instance, I think it would be nice to see much more progress from the government over perhaps crime than what we've had. And then in terms of the pipeline of projects, it's not so much the pipeline. The pipeline is a bit blocked by the ones that they're doing now.
So in relation to those 3 points, maintaining the books in a balanced way under the pandemic, developing an infrastructure pipeline, and establishing a framework for climate action, you're suggesting that all of those things would continue under your mayoralty?
Well, I think, take the last one, I think they made quite a brave decision to set a particular sum of money aside for climate change. And I don't have any problem with that. I think we'll just have to look into how do we actually maximise the benefit from that. That'd be an important thing to do.
Efeso, what's your view on this?
Well, I'm really proud of where we're heading. This is about being a climate resilient city, a society that's climate resilient, and I think the trajectory that we're on at the moment is a good one, but I'd like us to be more ambitious. I think more than $30 billion of infrastructure is good. We're a growing city. We're going to be 2.4 million people in the next 20 years. We've got to keep that pipeline going. We've got to make sure that we've got good rail connections, good bus connections. Electrifying much of the bus fleet as well as our own fleet at Auckland Council is a good thing. And keeping the books under control, we should be really proud of that. $447 million saved over the last 3 years, the last term of council. And we've got our debt to ratio status is at 18%. We should be really proud of this. We've got to be future focused, and I've kept the books under control. We've got the Auditor General who's looked in on this. We've got to make sure that we have those standards in place, and Aucklanders can be proud of the fact that they've got a council that is not broke, and they've got a council that's been really responsible and prudent.
Thank you. We'll come back to those points, I hope.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. Just looking at Auckland, it's arguable that it's been a casualty of COVID. We've been locked up and locked down, essentially, for a large part of the last few years. The perception of us internationally is that we have dropped on global cities' livability indexes. I want to hear from each of you, starting with you, Efeso. How do we get back up to where we're rating 1 and 2 in those indexes, as opposed to in the Economist Intelligence Unit, where we've plummeted to 34th? How do we turn that around, and what will you do to recover our image as a great place to live?
Well, I've been talking at length with a lot of the ethnic community about how we ensure that our connections with our overseas sister cities are connections that we really show some force on and connect well. We've got the tripartite agreement between ourselves, LA and Guangzhou, and those are partners who we know are going to get people back into the city. So we've got to... Let's look at housing then. There's a housing issue. If people want to come here, they want to invest here, that's both business investment and people wanting to work here.
But we're also perceived as having fallen on key metrics like health, those sorts of things, and crime.
Yeah.
So,
well, let me give you the big picture as to why people should be wanting to come here, and that's where we're going to have it, and then we can start to address some of that stuff. We've got a housing shortage. We know that Salvation Army have said 30,000 houses short. We can do better there. We can attack some of the ghost houses. We've got to direct Eke Pānuku that when they're doing urban regeneration, that we've got affordable housing, and that we want people to come to New Zealand knowing that they can live here, knowing that it's a good society. Coming to issues of crime, we've got major crime issues. I've researched this stuff, and you and I have been on panels where we've talked about this, but we've got to get local businesses supported by council.
Okay, I'm going to bring you in here, Wayne, at this point, because we are coming back to some of those questions later. But Wayne, I mean, part of it also is about the livability index. It's also about what it's like for people who are here now. What will you do to turn this around in quick pace?
Clean the streets up from cones, reduce the construction presence right to the barest minimum that it needs to be on the surface, not let an underground project take over the entire width of Albert Street, and put some disciplines around contractors working on the streets. People aren't going to come back into the CBDs around the world in the same numbers before. We've got 40% empty offices in the city. That stuff, with a bit of clever replanning from the planning department, we should be able to get some quite quick runs on converting some of that empty office space into apartments. More people living in the city improves safety, improves business operation, more light on the city, and I'm going to be encouraging the business associations to follow the successful models of some business associations who have spent heavily on security patrols for the benefit of their people, and where in those places, like Tahahu, shops are enjoying record retail sales, whereas poor old Queen Street's a bit depressing, and I live in K Road, so
Are you proud of where we are now?
I'm happy to be in K Road, but I'm not that happy when I go down Queen Street. It's a bit depressing. And I think that Commercial Bay and Britomart are developments we should be proud of, but it kind of falls away as you go up the street, and I'm very disappointed about that.
Okay, I'm going to jump in because you touched on transport there. That's a big part of the debate around getting Auckland running again. And maybe just to stay with you, Wayne, and we'll hear a bit more from Efeso on his public transport and things, but what is your transport strategy? What do you want to build? What would you change? I mean, how are you going to get Auckland moving?
Well, I'll change the board of Auckland Transport as quick as I can to people who've got experience in the sector. And I'd like to brain up the signals network so we actually get the types of flows that traffic engineers can get down roads. At the moment, they stop and start. Our lights aren't linked together in the latest digital manner that companies like 3M, I mean, a few years ago I was chairing LTSA, and in those days we were asked to produce maximum safety at reasonable cost. But now it seems to have turned into any cost, and that's not a sensible solution. But oddly enough, half of the infrastructure to provide a better linked service is actually up there. There's quite a lot of cameras on some of the lights, but they're not facing the right way. They're not linked to artificial intelligence to smooth things up. And years ago, 3M were demonstrating stuff that was quite surprisingly skillful in moving traffic. And it's not about speed limits. It's about keeping people to the speed limits. So you're
saying it's actual technical competence of the people running what we've got going at the moment? I'd question that, but also that we've spoken to some of the younger IT guys in there, and they said they'd like to do that, but the culture in AT doesn't support them investing in modern digital linking up. We shouldn't be building new roads until we're actually running the roads we've got at the capacity which they potentially can get. Okay, we're going to switch and just touch on the CRL, which is a big part of transport.
Before we go
jump
to
in
the
there.
CRL,
And you segue us to the CRL.
The idea of putting transponders on buses so that they get priority access through the traffic lights, speed up the buses. Don't they need to have priority bus lanes for that to work? Otherwise,
absolutely.
They do.
I like the idea of dynamic lanes, like we have. As one good example is Whangaparaoa Road, where you have 2 lanes into town in the morning, a set of lights alters, and there's 2 lanes out home. For instance, most of our bus traffic roads have a predominant direction of flow at a certain time of day. Dominion Road should have its own bus lane on the way.
The key is the bus lane, isn't it? The key is the bus lane unencumbered by parked cars.
Exactly, but if you have a dynamic lane system like they've got at Whangaparaoa, you do that by lights. And so at the moment we've got a bizarre situation where they have a bus lane which has 3 car parks every so often just to wreck it. Whereas I'd have no parking on the inside, and that's a full bus lane of the day, run with lights, and parking on the other side. And then it reverses at the end of the day. There's a bus lane and a dynamic, so that you use IT, and we've been doing it on the bridge for years.
Yes, of course.
And so
we've got to give Efeso a better response to that, because surely you're saying that it's not working now. They're not. It goes to competence. I mean, why can't they join everything up?
Look, we've got that IT that's been developed at the moment. It's been looked at. Transponders are going to save you 3 minutes on a commute. It's not the answer. We've got to be visionary. Fares-free public transport. The research is clear. It's going to take people out of their cars and onto the bus system. So that means we're going to decongest our roads. It becomes a much more pleasant experience for those people who are now no longer locked on the roads. $1.3 billion it's costing us in lost productivity.
Okay, I'd like to jump in here.
But let me finish, because it also
on that
attacks
point, though,
the cost of living crisis. And we've got a cost of living crisis that we all agree on. And fares-free public transport puts $27 back into people's pockets.
How is this going to be funded? How will it be funded?
And as I've said on many occasions, it's funded by the $2 billion that I've already identified in current buckets of Auckland Council that's reprioritised. We're looking at $236 million. I've identified a number of buckets, including roading improvements, $290 million in there, the customer experience, $350 million there, IT, and more IT and development, there's another 350 million there, as well as consultants, another $1 billion there. Just in that, that's $2 billion. It's reprioritising that money, and that means we can afford to pay for this. It's decongesting our roads. It is good for reducing climate emissions, and it's good for the cost of living crisis because it returns $27 back into people's pockets. That is the answer. That's visionary thinking.
I wonder if I could just pick up one of the other points you made, Wayne, about safety. Back in the day, safety, you said, was to be done at reasonable cost, but now it seems to be done at any cost. I wonder if you're familiar with what Waka Kotahi does now. Its principal method of ensuring safety on open roads is the cable barriers that run down the middle of the road and the sides of the road. They are by far the cheapest way to save lives, and they are effective. You'll know from the Brindewin Hills, on the north side of the Brindewin Hills, I don't think there's been a fatal accident there since they were installed. Just wonder how in touch you are with the technology that is being used now.
Those came up at the time that I was chair of the LTSA, and we attempted to initiate their introduction back then, but was stalled by government. So I'm well aware of them.
They're being introduced now.
They are, but it's taken them a while, but they're not being used all that sensibly. If you are travelling around a corner to the right, centrifugal force drives you to the outside of the turn. We've got safety fences on the inside of those, which is just against all basic physics.
That stop them driving across the road to the incoming traffic.
And then if you look at the one on Brindewin's, $53 million spent on the northern side, which was the side that didn't have the accidents, to turn a perfectly safe 100k road into a slightly less safe 80k road. That wasn't a good investment. And in fact, the contractors who went up there to price it all felt that they had the drawings around the wrong way. And again, that was based on a kind of a statistical analysis of end-of-life thing from people who hadn't studied any history. There was 26 people died in one crash.
I think we need to move on to infrastructure. Just on the CRL, because I know it is we're in it. You know, like the CRL, whether it's a horrible cost blowout mess, surely we're in it. We can't. What can you do about the CRL from here? You know, we just have to live with it, don't we?
I don't think.
Go, Wayne, and then yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. We're committed to it. We have to finish it, but that doesn't mean we have to sit back and just let them tell us how much it's ultimately costing. There are decisions you make all the way through projects. But the Auckland Hospital is a very, very complex project. We made decisions periodically through there in order to ensure we didn't go beyond the actual cost. So there were traits. It doesn't seem as though anyone's in the council is close enough to make decisions to that, other than waiting to know that we have to pay for half of it through on the ratepayers are up for half of that. It shocks me that they don't know. It shocks me that they're not keen to find out, that they've just handed it over to a person who is doing some form of negotiation. And I mean, you're handing it over to a person you don't know. We've elected these people. The contractor sends a bill every month. So every month we should have had something. And I'll tell you, we're heading into a time where their dollars are crashing.
If I could interrupt you, Wayne, on that. When you say we the public don't know what's happening with CRL.
Well, we the council don't know either.
Efeso is not the mayor. Efeso is not part of the confidential group that would be informed. But we do know that the CRL company is keeping council and the government closely informed. We do know that the reason for the confidence at the moment is that there are commercial negotiations underway.
That's a very convenient excuse.
Well, you can say that, but my question really to you is, if you were mayor and you had confidential information relating to commercial sensitivities...
Well, I want to know why it was confidential.
Would you be telling the public what the confidential information is?
Well, when we built the hospital, the public and the mayor and the board every month knew.
So you would
Open
official
oxygen
advice.
really cleans things up. Open air contracting to let you know how we're going is a sensible way. If there's going to be a shock for ratepayers, they should know well ahead of time. So I'm into...
Jump in there and cap this off,
280
then we'll move to
days were
infrastructure.
disturbed by this. During COVID, they were not able to have work undertaken for 280 affected days. We have a mediation process in operating now at the moment, and in the next couple of months we will have the detail of that mediation process. We should not be jumping ahead of any mediation process. It's very similar to a court process. You just don't comment, you wait, you allow it to go through its process, and then we will make a decision on the basis of the findings that we have in front of us. Look, all of us want the CRL finished. All of us want to benefit from how well that's going to operate, how it's going to connect people up. We want a modern transport system here in Auckland, but we've got to allow that mediation process to go through its course.
Okay,
because
so
us
to both
jumping
of you,
in is not going to help the
who will fund the blowout, the cost blowout?
Look, the cost blowout is something that we're going to have to decide at council. What we've got at the moment is an agreement between 50% from council and 50% from the Crown.
So
I
to
think
the
that
Crown, what will you say?
Well, I'll be saying to the Crown they should front up because they've got way more money than we have, and they could start by giving us back the $300 million that we pay on GST.
Wayne?
It requires a change in law. If we're up for half of the cost, we should have the ability to get in there and make some decision making on the way through. It looks to me quite Rolls-Royce at the end of things anyhow. The other thing, I looked into the figures yesterday as what I could from the CRL website, and the number of people that are expecting to go on it now has risen by 20,000 from when they did it in the first place, at a time when people are no longer in the city in the same numbers. That looks like wishful thinking to me.
I'd just like to keep going on infrastructure.
Yeah, let's get into infrastructure.
You know, we're in a period of rapid cost inflation, and a number of companies I've been talking with, just bringing in kit from overseas, pipes, that sort of thing, up through the roof, 70% in some cases year on year. How will you prioritise the infrastructure projects that you each want to do? How will you approach that?
Well, we go through a process now where we look at our infrastructure, what's needed in the city, and we work through it very systematically.
Which are the signature projects you personally want to get done?
Well, I would like to see us complete the CRL. That's going to happen. I would like to see light rail happen, although I disagree with the Crown on the way it's going to happen. I believe it should be at grade. They want to tunnel. My understanding is the Crown will pay for most of that, but I think it's something we need to have happen soon because it's important for the city. I'd like to see us bring forward the planning for the second harbour crossing. That's been brought forward in the last ATAP. It was 2048. It's now around 2036, so that's got to be planned for, and more rapid transit going
Wayne,
through
what's
the
your
northwest.
view on the sequencing of projects?
Well, the things that work really well in the external world, you repeat those quickly. What worked really well is the Northern Busway. So I'm shocked that the Eastern and Western busways haven't got a lot further ahead from where they are. And in fact, the Eastern one seems to have got itself tangled up with removing houses and things instead of taking the cheapest and most sensible
Where do
route.
you stand on light rail and second harbour crossing?
Well, the light rail thing, you first of all asked me what were my next things, and neither of them are those.
Okay.
I mean, finishing the Eastern and Western busways is absolutely essential, and finishing the CRL. And then seeing what it does, because I don't think you're going to get 57,000 people increased. And so what I would like to look at is, this is one of the few countries in which didn't spend a lot of time in the last 10 years building freight rail. We should be able to get all the freight off the wharf in trains, and there's a very good corridor between Avondale and Southdown, which is owned by Kiwi Rail now at the moment. The growth in Auckland is out to the northwest. That should be at least considered seriously. And as far as the light rail goes, they're having trouble explaining to me what problem it's fixing. Initially it was to get to the airport, then it was about intensification down Dominion Road. Then they passed a rule saying you can have three-storey houses everywhere, so everywhere is going to be intensified. Do they all get a free rail? So, and we haven't yet done dynamic and bus laning down through those roads to see what gain you get out of those. So I want to do those things first. And the other thing I want to do is that the decisions about what we do will come from Auckland. They're not going to come from Wellington telling us what to do. I've dealt with the Ministry of Transport, and they've never really built anything much. And the Waka Kotahi have built very little on time and on budget. And so there is enough expertise in Auckland for us to tell them, and your job as an MP is to go to Wellington and come back with the money, not come back with the projects.
Wayne, could I take you back to what you just said about the busways? East and West should be fast-tracked. I don't think there would be many people who would disagree with that. There is also the question of a busway from Botany to the airport, a second transit line on the North Shore, a whole lot of projects like that. And of course, motorway extensions. They're building a motorway, widening the motorway south of Papakura at the moment, and the plan is to keep going with that. All of that is work that by and large, has not yet really started. You
A little bit started. I
A
got
li-
caught
a
on the
li- a
wrong
little bit
side of the
started.
thing at Pepakura the other
Okay,
night.
Yeah, that started, yes. But only the 10 kilometres. The next 10 hasn't started, and the next after that, and so on. You spent a good deal of time in this campaign saying you would stop the construction projects that haven't started yet. You would not do anything new until the ones that we have underway already have finished. That was really your core policy when you began this campaign. Have you changed your position on this?
No, I think that's possibly how you interpreted the blunt statement that we should finish everything we're doing right now. That's absolutely essential. We don't know what the cost
no
of...
Botany to Manukau light rail,
Well,
bus transit, for example.
Well, I think that the ones that are actually underway, not the ones
That's
that
not
I'm
underway.
talking about.
There are many that are not
Well,
underway but
there's-
planned. Second Harbour Crossing.
We
is a
can
good
go,
example.
well, planning is a great thing. This council does a lot of planning, but not enough production.
But are you
of finished
suggesting we
things.
should stop?
Well, let me just go back and let's consider Mill Road out in Pepakura. You know, you go out their way and they want Mill Road done. I don't want Mill Road done. It's a big thing out there. So it doesn't come anywhere near carrying the capacity of what it can do at the moment. And so what happens is that then they come up with, we need to have a motorway through there, which of course costs a hell of a lot of money. When you go and have a look at it, there are 3 bad intersections which reduce the traffic out there. So you'd fix 3 bad intersections. And you do that because the decision makers are here.
So
They're not in Wellington. Because
so the
what they
argument-
do there is you
I'm
come up with
just trying
something
to get
so
some-
expensive that it kills it off.
I'm just trying to get some clarity on the argument that we should not do anything new until we finish the things underway at the moment. You're not saying that anymore, am I?
Well, I'm
reading you
saying
right?
we're not going to do anything until we're absolutely convinced it's the right thing as well.
Different thing. Okay.
No. Well, and also, you're going to finish these things and see what impact it has. What impact will City Rail... I mean, I think it's a good project. It's got to be finished. It should be sped up and sorted out.
You don't
And-
have doubts
but
about public transport in general now?
I've been a supporter of public transport. In fact, I went to the Auckland Public Transport Users Association's meeting about buses, which he didn't go to. And I think one of them should be on the board of Auckland Transport. I'm a great believer in customers having a say in the decision making.
All right, I'm going to keep us rolling along. Ports of Auckland has come up in the last couple of days. I think, Fran, you maybe take the lead on that one for us.
Okay, cool. Look, Ports of Auckland, obviously it's an issue. There's a long-term issue about where the port stays. But you flagged potentially some sort of commercial solution, as I read it in one of the debates. And a lot of stuff has been talked about in the business sector about a market solution where you might get the major port companies together and work to cross shareholdings and just sort out the whole issue. Can you explain where you're coming from and what has merit there, rather than a simple share sell down, which is not what I took from it?
Well, that's because it wasn't what I was intending, or even though the other day one of his supporters, Bob Harvey, came to me and see if he could work out how he could get a fee for selling it to one of his mates in England.
Okay.
But I said, that's not going to happen. So part of when we did the Upper North Island supply train study, we listened to 80 organisations. And one thing Auckland's not short of is opinions. Everyone's got one on that. But the 80 groups that we spoke to were in the industry. And what we recommended was the gradual closure of this thing, not immediate, and the removal of the obvious loss makers like the cars being parked there, and to use commercial drivers for these things, and the commercial driver is the value of the land. And
So would you look at separating out the operating company from the land value?
what we recommended was a senior New Zealander, and we put maybe a great panel would be John Key and Helen Clark together, or some senior person like that, to actually...
I've been texting, have they?
Yeah, well, no, we actually suggested somebody or other, or some senior person, to actually get the major companies together and work out what is best for New Zealand, because we're the only maritime nation that doesn't have a port strategy.
Yeah.
Our port strategy is for them to compete with each other, so they're all grossly overcapitalised.
So you would favour legislation being passed so that, because of obviously there's Commerce Commission issues, that this could have a market solution?
Absolutely, but it's got to be done in a way which benefits New Zealand rather than the shareholders here and there. There are currently blocking shares in Northport, so that the reason it's going ahead is nothing to do with demand, it's to do with blocking shares, which is not a good situation.
So, Efeso, I mean, what would your vision be for, one, Ports of Auckland, where it should be, but also how we go about solving this dilemma?
Yeah, well, I'll begin by saying that there will be absolutely no sale of strategic assets when I become mayor. So that we've got to hold that. That is a fundamental position that I'll take. Look, what we've got, the Sapir report, we've referred to one report, the Sapir report looks at movement perhaps in 30 years' time. Needs to be a decision that Council makes alongside iwi and the Crown. And that report recommends that a decision be made in the next 15 years. You asked the question about the possibility of a property company or a propco. I think that's something that could be looked at in the future, but let's get the company back up to where it was performing prior to where we were with COVID, and it was delivering $50 or $60 million in dividend up until that point.
Having borrowed the $50 million.
It didn't borrow any money. Your figures, you just make up all your figures. I'm a bit tired of this man making up all his figures.
So the 400 million, come on, where does it come from?
Yeah,
The
where does it
400
come
million
from?
that has been flagged on an annual basis from
You've
it.
got $6 billion worth of land.
Yeah.
And that Adrian Burr, who
Yes.
sadly has passed on, but was probably the guru, thought I was a bit low there. And so nobody else gets free land. 6.5% returns, pretty average. If you ask them to do it, they've got to do something. They can't carry on at the moment producing zero incomes and losing $600 million on failed automation projects. So they have to
It
do
wasn't
something.
$600 million. It was $36 million. It was part of a whole package of losses
Sorry,
that were
mate,
made. That's
haven't
completely
used-
incorrect.
That's
That is
not
misleading. That is completely misleading,
just-
and
you-
you know
you'll
that.
swallow
Well,
anything.
I met with the CEO of the Ports
Oh,
of Auckland,
really?
who's new, and gave me that detail.
They owned up to
You don't want to meet
$65
with
million
anybody, let
just
alone the
last
CRL
month.
people.
They owned up to $65 million just for the software. There's a hell of a lot of
That's
hardware
the whole
got to be-
automation project.
It was a
That's
$600
where
million
your debt
failure.
comes from. You're making things up, mate.
No, I'm not. You're just wishing.
Okay.
Nevertheless,
Book value of
would you like to-
$1.24 billion.
the
So where he
$6
gets
billion
his figures
worth of
from
land.
is what he's just making up.
So
you
will
sit in
apply
projections.
what
I'm
to
dealing with things
extract
that are
that
happening
money?
right
What
at
will
the
you
moment.
apply to? How will you extract that dividend off that land if you can't sell
Well,
it?
you
You
don't have to sell it to get the thing on. You can lease it. I mean, if you go down bottom of Queen Street and turn left, it's the very essence of a modern, wonderful city that the rest of the world want to come visit. And that is because there's leasehold land which has produced modern buildings, great interaction of the public with the harbour. People are enjoying it, and it's returning equivalent value of its land. You turn right, and there's a free car park for importers on $1.4 billion worth of land, just that flat bit straight away. And so you'd start making use of that straight away. That's
All right.
what you'd do.
That's good. It sounds like we're in agreement that around Key Street's gone well. Wynyard Quarter, yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah. Okay, look, and maybe some agreement, because I'm told that neither of you have committed to a ceiling on rate rises. I'll put that to both of you why you won't make that commitment. I know there's a segment of the voting public that likes to hear that rates aren't going up, and then maybe a bit of follow-up from Simon and Fran. So Efeso, to start.
I have made a commitment to a ceiling. I've said that in the first year, 3.5% general rates increase, which is what we've agreed to and voted on, resolved as a council for the long-term plan. What we then do is when we go back out and we consult with Aucklanders, we set the vision, we tell them what the plan is, these are the things we want to do, and then we turn to the 4 levers that are available to us, whether it's rates, borrowing more, efficiencies, or delaying projects. Those are the 4 levers available to us.
But you don't have 5. 5 would be selling something.
No, I don't. No, I
Yeah.
have no intention of selling
Yep.
strategic assets.
All right, Wayne, rates, what can you commit to or what won't you commit to?
Well, I've sat in halls for months with various candidates, dwindling numbers of candidates, and you can make a number which makes the hall feel happy. But I have a very good track record of fixing things and not promising things I can't deliver. And so you can make the hall happy, or you can consider where we are. We are in a situation where the English people are having to defend the pound, our dollar's falling, the days of cheap interest rates are over. The council has wallpapered over some of its problems by accepting initial payments against 3 Waters, and we don't know what the cost increase is going to come out on the CRL, but they're kind of like softening us up for $1 or $2 billion from that, from what the statements I've got from those guys. So my commitment will be a laser focus on costs and reducing costs within. And there's another $30 million blowout in staff costs this year. at a time when they should be actually reducing it. And so my commitment is to have a real tough look on costs. And I pay rates and don't particularly like paying rates. I want to have them, I've been told off for that, but I want to have the minimum that I can get away with. But I don't know what commitment we've been caught with. And
You don't think you could beat 3.5?
Well, it's not an auction now. And the other thing is that the mayor alone doesn't set them. You've got to convince the council with you. There's a fair bit of input going on. And I certainly don't think that the lever which has been used for years is just lifting debt because there's a debt ceiling. And the thought that you have a AA credit rating is nothing to do with the management of the council. It's just that you can demand rates off everybody, and that's not a good thing to do. And the other idea of 18% of debt to assets, these are not recoverable assets or tradable assets. Like in a commercial situation, on commercial buildings that I might own, I might have a debt to ratio, but they're fully tradable. And the debt is the one thing that doesn't go down. Your value of your assets might go up and down, but you can't sell Cornwall Park or Queen Street or streets or anything to cover those things, and he won't even sell things that are actually listed companies.
Any follow-up on the rates, guys, Simon?
I suppose the simple question is that a lot of people would feel that they're hoping to hear the sentence, rates will not increase by more than the rate of inflation. Is either of you prepared to say that?
What if you can't?
Okay.
I mean, basically, I intend to keep them as low as possible. And
But every politician will say that.
But they're gonna. You can't pick a figure that far ahead with knowing what is inflation this year. Inflation's going apeshit. I wouldn't want to even think of it comparing it with apeshit with inflation. That's awful, and it's not an excuse for everything to go up.
Narrowing in on this sole discussion is useful for those people who want to think about it in those terms. So I think we've got to lift the conversation just a little bit and ask ourselves, we are a growing city. Remind ourselves we are going to be 2.4 million people in the next 20 years. What is the contribution that we are making to a growing city? That's not just residences, that's also looking at local businesses. And when you start to think about those things, we went out, we consulted on the climate action targeted rate. 68% of Aucklanders said yes, and that's why it was implemented. So what we've got to do is look at what we want for a growing city. We've got to be visionary. That's the role of the mayor. But we've got to have it, that standard, the baseline on the rates, but it's ensuring that people are thinking about the growth that the city is heading towards.
Well, this is a good time to jump into one of the New Zealand Herald's favourite topics, which is housing. And density, I guess, is the issue. You look at what's going on in Christchurch, where Auckland is at with the density and the balancing act between government. Efeso, starting with you, how comfortable are you with what the government's talking about with regards to density, and will it be full steam ahead in terms of multi-apartments?
Yeah, look, I think as a council, we settled on what was best. We went out, we had a look, we did some assessment, we had grades that we judged things on. Heritage is covered under the law. It's the special character where we've had quite a bit of feedback from. And I would have liked to have seen a bit more intensification, but as a council, we talked about it, we focused, we had good, robust discussions, and I believe we settled on a place that is good for Auckland, although I'd like to see more intensification, because we can't just lean on South Auckland and West Auckland for all of the intensification of the city. But what we've got to do is bring people with us. That is something that has come from Wellington. Parliament have laid this on us. There is a process to go through yet over the next year, and we will allow those independent hearings processes to go take their course to see what they believe our decision, how good the impact or how poor the impact is going to be on the city. But I'm satisfied that where we landed is a reasonable position for all of Aucklanders. We're not going to please everyone. This is what leadership looks like.
Sure. Wayne, you're not such a fan of the high density, or is that unfair?
What I'm not at all a fan of is Wellington politicians telling Auckland how our city should be. We went through a long, agonising process to get a district plan. I actually spent 2 days to lodge my submission in there, and it was 2 terrible days, but I did it. And we got a district plan which is not that bad. And then the next question is, are we actually growing? Because we're not at the moment, and we may not.
Obviously.
We don't know about that. Predictions are very hard, especially about the future. But
if we don't grow, people won't build the high density places, will they?
Well, the district plan had enough room for a lot more houses to come anyhow. But right at the moment, the sensible place to put those is in the 40% of empty office space in the CBD, because all the all of the infrastructure is already there.
Well, almost. I'm told, Ann Gibson tells me the plumbing is very hard to move office blocks from to accommodation.
Not that hard, because in fact I live in an apartment which was the telecom office tower,
Sure.
and it wasn't that complicated. But not only that, it's good for the environment because the people are where they're going to work already. There's less people going to catch
Broadly,
CRL.
we all think people in the central area is good, but I guess what we're debating is some of the suburbs that seem to be hands off. Simon, you know,
Well, I think they're the character of Auckland, and I mean in Singapore, which is a city economy which has a lot of promise for New Zealand to copy, but they flattened everything and moved everyone into these dense things, and they suddenly realised that there was nothing left of interest, so they stopped and left India Town there, which is their major tourist appeal. And so I want to make Auckland a place where Aucklanders are proud of and get rid of the ugly
but
stuff.
you were
Portland being one of
comfortable with Auckland City's original plan before the government
Totally
came
was.
over the top.
Yeah, that was having spoken to everybody, and there was some at that stage there. What I got into that was because I actually took a house in Grey Lynn, a bungalow, and I wanted to have another story on it, so that we could have two families in there, my children and their children could be in there as well. We went through the whole thing, and the rules actually almost prevented it. I didn't mind the rules about making the appearance match everything else around there. That was fine. But in fact, the rules at the time prevented that. And so I got those changed so that they did encourage that. So that was a positive that came out of that. It didn't need to be interfered from Wellington. You can actually intensify the attractive areas without losing the appeal.
So it's about the degree. Simon, you got any thoughts?
The question really is whether apartment developments in the central city are forging ahead. If you look at the graph, that's very high. The outer suburbs is also very high. They don't have, a lot of the time, they don't have the infrastructure to support the development that might be going in there. But the
Exactly.
ring of fringe suburbs, which of course were developed 20, 30, 40 years ago, an awful lot of infill housing went in, but there is capacity for more without destroying their character.
Well,
That's the argument.
Yeah, well, I've proved that.
But it's difficult to do because of the reaction of people who live there.
Well, you could do it. We did that in Grey Lynn, and it did take a bit of doing, but in fact we were able to get two families living in one bungalow. It looks just like a bungalow.
That's not the answer to the growth. The lowest areas of population growth in Auckland have been those fringe areas that you're talking about because there's been too little intensification. I think we've landed on a plan that's good. Where there is infrastructure that we've got available to us, where we've got pipes and toilet water and whatever else it is the 40,000 ghost houses that exist in Auckland at the moment. And so if we're working, you've got to do these things hand in hand. We've got to get good intensification,
So
we've got to
how
plan
are you
well,
going to get
and we've
use
got to
out of
stop
them?
planning for a city that is
You
all
talked
about
about-
sprawl.
You can't
And so we've
talk
got
about
that at
ghost
the moment.
houses and not say what you'll do about them.
Yeah, no, and I have said what I'm
So
going
what
to do
will you
about
do
it. And
about
what I will do is make sure that the housing unit, both Eke Pānuku and the housing unit from within council, is connecting with homeowners to say to them, we've got great community housing providers,
No, but
and
the
we can
empty
work
houses,
with them.
how do they get utilised?
Yeah, we can bring them onto the rental market. That's what I mean by working alongside the community housing providers, because that's 40,000. Even if we only got 5,000 of them,
So that's just connecting
onto
with the
market.
owners
Yeah,
and convincing
and that's easy enough to do. It's not going to cost us any more, but we've got to convince them. And I think what we've looked at, we've got to see housing as a basic human right, not as just some investment thing that I can sit on for 5 years and I'm going to double my money when I sell it. This is about social responsibility in a city that is evolving and growing.
Sure.
Which will run into property rights.
I know
And,
Fran's got a couple of
I
finance
do have a
questions,
couple of questions
He
here.
wants to
People
come back
want
to.
to share their houses, though,
No, they
Fran.
don't.
I know they do.
So, not that they're
Forcing
ghost
everyone to-
houses, that's why they're ghost houses.
They don't want to
So-
rent their batches out.
Okay,
of
what I
Taonui,
want to ask,
Back on
gentlemen,
budgets.
what I want to
Taonui's not
ask,
here.
what I want to ask, in a week or two's time, one of you will be mayor. You'll have to put up a proposal for a budget by the end of the year, and then there's the 10-year project next year. What are your key priorities? And I also want to know, you both talk quite a big game. Who are going to be your advisors? Are you going to come in with a range of people to run your office, all that? I mean, we know nothing about who you will surround yourself with.
Yeah, well, driven by climate change and climate action. That's what's going to be the premise of how I establish what that plan's going to look like. Look, I'm really excited about our own climate change plan. I think it's a great plan. I'm also excited about the ambitions of the TERP, the emissions reduction plan. That's really good. And that high ambition is where we need to be focused on. I'll make sure that the numbers and how we transition.
Priorities. You've talked about chopping out a couple of bill,
So urban
I read
ngahere,
you
making sure
right.
we've got good urban ngahere throughout the city.
Yeah.
We lift levels, especially in West and South Auckland, that's at around 8%. And parts
public
of the,
trees.
Yeah, public trees, public trees. Get electrifying the bus fleet, going further than what we've got. So this is the focus that
These
we
are
need
your
to have.
budget priorities.
These will be priorities. What's a climate
Budget
change?
priorities.
Well, they're driven by a
All right.
climate
So
resilient society
who will you
and the
bring?
people.
Who will you bring into the office with you?
Well, I've got a team around me at the moment that leads the campaign, but look, I'm not going to say whether it's announcing a deputy mayor or something like that, or who's in the team. We're going
Who
to have
would
experts.
staff your office?
I'll have a team ready. I don't think it's important that I announce who they are. The staffing arrangements is not what the mayoralty race is about. We're presenting a vision for the city, and I will have experts beside me, whether that's internal to council or external to council. There are good people, but I don't think naming them here, naming who my staff is going to be
Wayne?
be of any use to anyone.
Wayne, priorities, budget.
Priorities
People.
is to actually know exactly where the money is right now, because there's quite convenient uses of figures which represent the council or the total group. The debt, for instance, varies from 11 to 16 depending on whether it's a group or not the group. What is the so I want to know exactly where we are. The big sewerage interceptors just are very important to Auckland to allow intensification and to get the harbour back into good condition. They're saying that that cost hasn't changed in 18 months. Well, either they're very good or there's another problem coming. So I want to find out exactly what our basis we're
But
working
again,
on.
you've got to produce a plan by the end
Oh,
of the year.
absolutely.
The
But you
proposal.
can't produce a good plan if you don't know, if you don't have complete faith in the numbers. So I've got a team of accountants poised and ready to head at that already. And
Okay.
I have access to a lot of business.
So that's sort of the external view, and I just want to get onto, we have to rattle through a few here, but the relations with CCOs and council staff is pretty key here, because what I'm picking up is that Wayne, you're coming in sort of the outsider to really shake things up. Efeso, I'll start with you though, that there might be a perception that you're too much of an insider and that people aren't going to see enough change.
Oh, they'll see change. One of the things I do, as we've been around on this campaign, people are really upset about Auckland Transport. So my position is to bring 2 voting councillors back onto the board of Auckland Transport and make sure that they align. Section 91 of the Act says that they've got to align with the policies and plans of council. So we've got to get them better aligned. And we've got to make sure that our communication is much better. I'd also like to see, with a slight shift in some of our policies on council, we could get a voting direct councillor who could be a director on the Ports of Auckland. So by creating the stronger link, we're going to have better conversations. We've seen changes both in the ports, both at Auckland Transport, that you can have CCOs better connected, and the CCO review showed clearly that the community wants better engagement. That's going to happen.
So you're able to put the bureaucrats under the pump, like put a bit of pressure on the bureaucrats, because that's the sense I get from those who want change, that we are slightly at the mercy of the bureaucrats and how they've decided to run the city.
Yeah, and I think what's key here is the communication. What people get really upset about is that you know we're told these things are going to happen, but we're not taking communities with us. And I think communication is key, and that's what I think having those councillors back on the boards is going to do. But you can't just bringing just chopping off eke pānuku, which is what Wayne is suggesting, means you leave projects half done. You can't have half-baked projects in Northcote or Onehunga, just leave them out there. You've got to finish those projects. And so eke pānuku plays a really pivotal role in ensuring that we've got the urban regeneration that Auckland needs as a growing society.
Okay, Simon, you want to follow up?
I do want, and I want to change the topic if that's okay.
Well,
Leah.
I want to go to Wayne here though before
Right.
that, because Wayne, the perception is you will come in from the outside and shake things up. But there is, when we look around the country, look at Tauranga, Wellington, look around the world, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you get a situation of conflict, gridlock, because someone's tried to do things differently, and the structure of council, the structure of the CCOs doesn't allow it. How will you guarantee that we avoid that?
Well, the structure of the CCOs is probably a mistake from the start, in my view.
No, but if you come in and say, we're doing it differently, and the structure is so embedded, you just end up in a conflict and nothing happens.
Well, the first thing I'll be doing is sitting down with all the councillors and making sure that I do have sufficient numbers to do what I want. But it's going to be very hard for them to say, when one of my mates was stopping wasting money, I said, well, do you want to carry on wasting money? So I'm pretty confident that I was...
So you're not going to fire them like
them.
you said you
So
would?
I've heard you say on the campaign trail, quickly you would fire all the members of all the CCO boards.
As soon as I can get through the process, that's what I intend to do.
You do? Okay. You're not resigning from that.
As soon as I can, but the process has to be followed carefully. I know this, I've done it before, and it's quite tangled up. But we
So
have...
what makes you so confident that your judgment is so concrete that you can actually just fire all the board members?
I'm not absolutely sure we can do this, but I'm advised that we can, and I have campaigned on that, and it receives a very good public response.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Yeah.
And then I look at if you look at the makeup of the boards, they are pretty well all professional directors who only earn their income from going $1 million. Some of them have got 12 boards that they're on. That's not a director. I like a director who has a basic business of their own and have 2 or 3 on the side, and they have to come from the industry. We don't have the port and the Auckland Transport, the two worst offenders, don't have people who are buried in that industry on the board. They are kind of professional. They know how to go to meetings, open the minutes, read the papers, talk about safety, look at the numbers, and go home,
So
go to
do
the
you
next
think
one. You
boards
think,
should-
what was that we were
Do you
at?
think boards should have people who have professional governance expertise, who represent the public?
If you've got
who
if
represent
you've
the
got a
users of the
business
services
that sells to the public, you will automatically have those things. I mean,
on the board? But
you can't run a big... Like one of the guys that I was thinking that I'd love to be able to put on Auckland Transport has just sold 1,500 buses. He can't have gotten to that situation without understanding governance. He can't understand with... he knows the industry. He knows the need for customers. And we don't... Port, for instance, has been asleep at the wheel. There's been no movement in their charges at a time when the Maersk have tripled their charges. Now, that is just sleep at the wheel stuff. And people like Noel Coombe, who is the guru of freight forwarding, put his name forward to get onto the ports, and he was told by the current mayor that he didn't have sufficient qualifications.
I don't think anyone would argue that boards need to be renewed and refreshed, and in fact Phil Goff did exactly that. He replaced the chair of the Ports of Auckland board and some
with
of
a
its
professional
other members.
director who I know quite well, and she's a very good lady, but she's not actually deeply embedded in the understanding of that industry.
And with an expert in industrial safety, would you say that her role was wrong on the board?
Well, if you wanted
Given it
industrial
fits the port?
safety, you could have listened to the members of the union who told everybody for you.
probably.
I would like to have a union member on
So
the
you're
board.
talking about putting
Engineers.
key people, engineers, others from industry on boards?
People
essentially?
who shift
But nobody
containers,
else?
people from the... Why wouldn't you have a union member on the board? I'm not opposed to unions. Those guys, they spent $600 million trying to get rid of them, and they told you it wouldn't happen. And they didn't listen. They told them it was unsafe. They didn't listen. Some of the best people on a construction site to ask about safety are the
move
people
on
who
to
work on it.
A related question about
Okay,
how
okay.
councils operate.
Yep, well, we'll head into this issue of performance on
So,
council.
Wayne, when you were Mayor of the Far North, you were told off by the Auditor General for blurring your public and private roles. I've never heard you say that was wrong of you to do that.
I've learnt a lesson,
What is the lesson?
not to blur them.
Not to blur them.
Not to blur them.
Okay, so
And in
that's
this case here, I have a lot less to blur because, in fact, most of my business interests aren't in Auckland.
all right. So the year after you were told that in the Auditor General's report, you wanted to go to a mining conference in Canada. You were still the mayor. Your council said you couldn't go. You had
I paid
shares in a mining company yourself. You part paid for it yourself. The council was worried that your business card said Wayne Brown, Mayor of the Far North, and it contained your private contact details.
Well, let me
not
tell you
your
about that.
council
When I got
details.
to be the mayor of the Far North, the chief executive produced a business card for me, which had all those things on it. And so I'm not going to be have you picking on me for something or other, which was done by the chief executive, and I just picked it up and took it.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for that.
And-
I certainly don't want a card, and I certainly don't want a credit card.
Okay,
this
but you
time.
used your council credit card.
No, I didn't.
To pay for some of that
No, I
trip
didn't.
and then repaid
No, I
the card.
did not. That was totally
Well,
wrong.
I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay,
but
I'd like to- no, I'd
actually,
like to jump
I have a follow-up
Well,
question
quickly,
to that,
because we
and
need to,
that
need
is
to
that
keep moving, and we need
you
to
own
give
a
a few
pub
states a bit
in
more time. Thank
Otahuhu,
you.
which makes a lot of money out of pokie machines, and you are on record opposing the sinking lid for pokies. You take a picture of all these
I did
things.
not. It's completely wrong. Where do you manufacture these stories from? I have never said I oppose the sinking lid. The sinking lid is a fine idea. I don't have any problem with that. So don't invent stuff, please.
Okay,
Okay.
I'd like to
Who
jump
Fran-
in here.
Fran-
No, I'd like
No,
to
you
jump
did
in.
not,
Yep.
because I do not. It's
Well,
actually
we've got
against my
questions
business.
And I'd like to give
Efeso
Efeso a little
as
bit more
well.
time as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See, this is what happens when you decline the interview the first time.
I'm sure there's
Like
good
the
follow-up
like the
stories.
Auckland Public
Okay, all right,
Transport
enough
Users
gentlemen.
But also-
Association.
also-
You didn't
76
know.
Gentlemen, we're
events.
running out of
76
time. I've got some
events.
Well, you went to a
credibility
lot
questions
less
for
than
you
I've
too.
done.
Yep.
I mean, one of the
Couple questions for
issues
you,
which has
Efeso.
come up is your attendance at council meetings, your attendance record. What confidence do we have in you, given that?
Yeah, the same confidence that the people of South Auckland who voted me into office know that for 4 months I fronted COVID vaccination events, and that's where all of that time was taken up.
Well,
So
no.
whilst-
Sorry, you were
No,
elected to
I'm-
council. Why did you still not
Because I am a
attend council meetings?
representative for the people of Manukau. That's
In
why. And the
council.
people wanted
You're not
an
a-
advocate.
you're not
the
an
people
MP.
of Manukau
You're not an
wanted an
MP.
advocate. When the MPs got it wrong, I stood up. When they weren't rolling out, when they weren't vaccinating
That's all
frontline
fine,
people.
that's all fine,
But
but
you
your
need
attendance-
a context for how this happened.
No,
and the
I-
context for which it happened
I don't buy
was
it.
well, I'm sorry that you don't buy it, but the fact of the matter is, I was out there ensuring that the people of Manukau, who are the people that voted me into office, had a strong advocate for that. 4 months of that was taken. The same time the church closed its doors on me, and the same time I had death
Could
threats.
you
So
not
all of
have
those things.
also done council meetings as well?
No, because
Kept up.
yeah, I could have taken the phone calls whilst we were at the COVID vaccination centres, but I made a deliberate choice to represent the people of South Auckland so that they were vaccinated. And that is 4 months of representing those people who voted me into office. I'm satisfied that the way in which I represent the people of Manukau is one that they can be proud of. And that's why I think it's
But you're
important that people know
also
that.
an elected councillor and you haven't fulfilled all your
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah, and there are a number of people who sit at the same rate as me. And they too
they're not
were
vying to
also
be mayor.
Yeah, but they too were at the vaccination centres. I am vying to be mayor today, but at that stage of the electoral cycle, I was representing South Aucklanders who had the lowest level of vaccination going on at the time and got death threats for it. And I took time off for death threats for well-being needs. But I think that's really important that people know that for 4 months I was out there representing my community.
All right, quickly, we're near wrapping up. One thing I've got on the list is crime. Does Auckland have a crime problem? And what, if anything, can a mayor do about that? Wayne, start with you, but quick answers if we can, because I'll rattle through.
I'm going to encourage the business associations who are funded by council to spend more of their money on security like we do in Otahu, and that works pretty well. And I'm also going to put some pressure on the government that we could have an Auckland commissioner up here rather than a Wellington commissioner. We deserve it. It's a third of New Zealand. And it would be really nice if the police had a higher percentage on the beat and less in the office. It used to be 80-20 the other way around. It's gone around the wrong way now. And so those are sensible things to do.
Can you sell that though? I mean, you're the mayor. You don't have the power, right?
Not in theory, you don't, but there's an election coming up in a year's time. That's
Okay.
quite close, and so we'll have a little auction there.
What can you do
How
about
many- How many
crime
police there, national? How
on the
many
streets
Labour?
as mayor?
Strong advocacy to the Crown. Firstly, we can continue to fund. We did that when I was chair of Wairarapa to a local board, increase the numbers of CCTV, and then community wardens as well. We've got Pacific wardens, Indian wardens and Māori wardens working with local businesses so that everyone felt like they were safe. There's major issues we have here. When you back it up, the advocacy to the Crown needs to be with groups like Kāinga Ora, Ministry of Social Development, because we need social workers, community constables, youth workers and teachers working together to target these young people who are undertaking these activities.
All right, I'm going to start to wrap up. A question each from both of you, if you like. Who's ready to roll with the Simon?
if you like.
One question for both, and then a question from both from Fran.
Okay. I imagine everybody would agree council should be as efficient as possible, that it should be tightly run by people who know how to investigate, to know how to deal with flannel when it's presented to them by officials, by the public, by CCOs or by whoever. A lot of this goes down to character. A lot of it goes down to the ability to get people to do the right thing. Efeso, the challenge against you is that you're too nice a guy to be able to do that. Wayne, the challenge against you.
Don't
Not
say
that
I'm
you're
not a
not a
nice
nice
enough
guy.
guy.
It's not that you're not a nice guy.
Is the
The
obviously
challenge
opposite.
is that if we look at the most recent experience when you tried to get government to do something, which was over your port report, you actually enraged them
No, I
by the
didn't.
way you carried it out. So that's the question for both of you. How will you be tough enough and how will you be diplomatically smart enough?
Okay, and we'll do a minute each on that. Wayne, you go. Are you a nice guy?
The Auckland Hospital has a random selection of people.
It's a
who
long
are
time ago.
put on it. And it was quite controversial because...
A long time ago, Wayne.
No. You talked about character. Character is what within you. You know, it's not something... I mean, you can't have a journey and convert from being not liking
Yes, you can.
people for
You
12...
can.
Oh,
Thanks for
I-
commenting on my journey. I
No.
appreciate that.
But then you are. But you're suggesting your character is how you get on with people, and I got them on. Here's a good example. Then the current Deputy Prime Minister showed up to the opening of a brand new sports complex in Whangarei, which I arranged the funding and construction for, and
Minister
he
of
had to
Sport.
sit. What?
He's the Minister of Sport and Recreation.
Yes,
of course
right.
he did.
He had to sit through 4 agonisingly long speeches saying what a great job I've done bringing people together so we got this thing in time for the Women's Rugby Cup. So the track record says that it works. At Auckland Hospital, we took $100 million out of the operating contest without anybody missing a single service, without anybody missing out on a thing, and I ended up with people like Nada Glavish, who's on my election team, thinking that I did a wonderful job, and she can be quite difficult.
Efeso, are you hard-nosed enough for this job?
Yeah, I was hard-nosed and I showed it by standing up to the government when I voted against the regional fuel tax. I think what we are in a generation now that require people to show recognition and respect for the hard work that they're doing. I want to do that. I don't know, the nice guy phrase is really just a cheap way of saying that, you know, people feel threatened sometimes by the way in which I approach them. I think what's really important is a collaborative, constructive approach, and you make the hard decisions. But that means you've got to work with people, and that's what I think it means to be hard-nosed. You work with people, you outline where you disagree on things, but you get to a point where you can really satisfy a way forward, and that's what I think it means to be hard-nosed.
Sure. Okay, we're going to wrap with Fran's got a question for both of
Yeah,
you.
just
and we're
quickly,
bumping
I
up
mean,
against our
again,
time limits.
this election is coming up very soon.
Thank God.
On the election night, one of you is going to be mayor. What will you say to the other if you are that mayor? And what will you say if you lose and you have to concede? I mean, what will you wish for each other? You've been playing together for a long time on this campaign, hard fought. What will you say to each other?
I don't mind. Who goes first? You choose.
I will offer my sincere congratulations. This has been a hard-fought campaign. For me, it's been since last November when I made the announcement that I was seeking an endorsement process. But whoever gets this role has got to be someone who's got a vision for Auckland, is going to take Auckland forward. If that person is not me, I'll be ringing Wayne. I'm guessing it'll be you, Wayne, and I'll be offering my sincere congratulations, but support, because this is all of our city. And this doesn't just mean you get all yuck and go hide somewhere. I'm still going to live here. I'm raising my family here. I will still be here, and I'll offer my full support.
Oh, it's pretty good too. I mean, we have enjoyed quite a lot of friendship on the way through here. It's been the other ones we've actually found trouble with. And that's been pretty good. I would make use of Efeso's connection to the particularly Pacifica in South Auckland and his goodwill towards that one. Why wouldn't I? He's got great skills in that, and I think that I'll also be having a nudge to the Labor Party and saying, I think this guy's got a future down in Wellington.
All right, look.
You're going to thank him for that?
Yeah, thank you. I thought I'd be Chief of Staff for his office.
That might be a nice place to wrap. I want to thank you both for turning up. I think Aucklanders have got a clear choice here, and I just would encourage people to get out, find a post box, and get those ballots.
Library.
Countdown supermarkets.
Ballots in there,
Countdown.
countdown, supermarkets, and vote, because it's going to be fascinating. Thank you again, both of you, for turning up. Cheers.
Cheers.
And thank you to our
Thanks,
panellists.
Mate.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good on you. Catch up, friend.